So welcome back. We are getting near the end, and you folks just keep on coming back for more. So now you're in for it. So let's see where we are. We can move on. You have earned the right to find out what's really going on in the universe now. So again, a lot of you have my book. That's nice to see. But you don't have to have the book. But what I have for you now is most of the table of contents from the book, because everything we've done up until now has been setting the stage for the rest of the book. What we've done until now has been astronomy, trying to understand why the discovery of planets in the universe beyond our solar system is something that is real now. We know about lots of planets. We're going to study those planets. We are likely to discover in this century whether any of those planets have life on them. And the question before us, I think, is wondering whether the discovery of life on those planets has meaning for us. And one of the ways the discovery of life or the discovery of the absence of life on any or many of those planets has meaning for us would be for us religiously. So in the rest of the book, what I did is I investigated a number of major religions on our planet, because so far we are the only planet on which we know about life, and therefore the only planet which has established religions. And these chapters have most of the major religions on our planet that have been established prior to the 20th century. You'll notice there are no 20th century religions. I avoided the 20th century for all sorts of reasons, but this is where we stopped. So what we're going to do today is begin to go down the rabbit hole, as I promised we would do. The religions that are in bold, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and the Baha'i faith, those are the ones we're going to try to wrestle with today. The other religions that are not highlighted today are either Christian religions or religions that are somehow derived from Christianity in some fashion. And those are the ones that we're going to wrestle with next week. And the approach that I took in my work was to try to look at the sacred writings of each religion, and as best as I could to see what those sacred writings had to say about extraterrestrial life, and then to try to understand what writers within those religious domains had to say about their own writings. So within limits, I tried to stay out of it. Now, at some point, I had to step into it a little bit to try to understand what the writers were saying or what the sacred writings had to say. But I was trying to understand what people within those religious domains had to say about their own writings. So that's what we'll try to do. The questions that I found most interesting I've summarized here. First one, is my God the God of the entire universe? Which to many people sounds like a silly question, but for much of human history, some people could have a God for their side of the street, and other people could have their God for their side of the street. So it's not necessarily a silly question. Is my religion just for humans on Earth? Could my religion work somewhere else in the universe? If you were able to get on a rocket ship and go to some other part of the universe, would your religion work in another part of the universe, on another planet? A related question to that one is, would it make sense to convert other intelligent beings in another part of the universe to your religion, whatever your religion is? And then the third question, could E.T. practice your religion, whatever your religion is, on their planet or on your planet? If you went to another part of the universe, could your religion actually be practiced in that other part of the universe? And there may be lots of other good questions to ask, but these are questions that help guide me in trying to think through what I was doing. So let's start with Judaism. And part of what I had to do was educate myself about a lot of these religions, because for some of them, I didn't know a whole lot about the religions before I started. So for some of them, certainly in the book and a little bit here, I'll give you a little bit of background on some of the religions, just a little bit for those of you who don't know much about it. Most of you probably know something about Judaism. But Judaism is the oldest of the monotheistic religions. It emerged about 6,000 years ago. In Jewish tradition, God spoke to Abraham, who was the first Jew, the patriarch of the Jewish religion, and told him, "Pray to me. I'm the only God. There are no other gods." The holy book, or the first of the holy books for Judaism, is known as the Torah. The Torah includes several books that are familiar to most of us: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are known in Judaism as the written law. There are some other holy books in Judaism. One is known as the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a legal compilation written by rabbis in the modern era about 1700 years ago, mostly written in the 2nd century of the modern era. They are commentaries on the laws that are in the Torah. So the Torah has lots of laws. Thou shalt do this, and thou shalt do this, and thou shalt not do this. And the Mishnah contains commentaries trying to understand and explain those laws. And then there's the Talmud. The Talmud contains rabbinical commentaries on the commentaries that are in the Mishnah. Commentaries on the commentaries. Those commentaries that are in the Talmud were written during the 300 years that followed the compilation of the Mishnah. So those are most of the holy books, if you will, for Judaism. And depending on which branch of Judaism you live in, you accept the Mishnah and the Talmud as somehow brought to you through human form from God, or maybe they're just human commentaries, but they're important. So let me introduce you to Rabbi Hasti Crescas, who lived in the 14th century. He's one of the most important medieval Spanish philosophers. In the Talmud, and remember, the Talmud contains these commentaries on the laws that are in the Torah. There is a question. And one of the questions in the Talmud is, what does God do at night? May or may not be a reasonable question to ask, but the Talmud has that question. What does God do at night? And Rabbi Crescas answers the question by saying, he flies through 18,000 worlds on his chariot. Why would God do that? Well, Rabbi Pinchas Elihu Horowitz of Vilna tried to answer that question in the late 18th, early 19th century. He wrote a response to Crescas. What's known as the Kabbalah is a mystical branch of Judaism. And in his response, he suggested that intelligent life exists on those 18,000 worlds. That's why God flies through those 18,000 worlds at night. Those life forms on those 18,000 worlds might not be like us, but they nevertheless exist. So God flies on his chariot through those 18,000 worlds at night because they're inhabited by his creations, and he cares about his creations, and he chooses to visit them periodically. Okay? Maybe. There isn't much, by the way, in Genesis or Leviticus or Deuteronomy or Numbers about extraterrestrial life. So if you want to know something about Jewish ideas on extraterrestrial life, you've got to start looking deeper than what might be in Genesis. More modern ideas, Rabbi Norman Lamb, who was the head of Yeshiva University in New York City for, well, you can do the math, about 3 decades, okay, wrote a commentary called The Religious Implications of Extraterrestrial Life. And I don't expect you to read all of that, but I expect you to read this. So I've got it for you. This is from that piece of work. He writes, "Man is deemed valuable by Judaism. God is in no way diminished by our learning that his creation far exceeds what had previously been imagined. Man's non-singularity does not imply his insignificance. Judaism, therefore, can very well accept a scientific finding that man is not the only intelligent and biospiritual resident in God's world. We affirm our faith that God is great enough to be concerned with all his creatures. No matter how varied and how far-flung throughout the remotest galaxies of his majestic universe, man may not be the purpose of the universe, yet he may have a purpose in the universe. For the believing Jew, therefore, man can accept a far humbler place in the universe than previously assigned to him without surrendering his intrinsic worth and meaningfulness before God." So Judaism, he says, can easily accept other intelligent beings in the world. It's not a problem. Rabbi Jeremy Kalamanovsky, who teaches at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City, also wrote a piece very recently called Cosmic Theology and Earthly Religion. And in that piece he wrote, "The cosmos is so vast, it silences the mind. We live on a nothing special planet, orbiting a nothing special star. Theologically, I must conclude that this all cannot be about us. Religion is the human, social response to transcendence. Normative Judaism provides an excellent, time-tested path for sanctifying our minds, morals, and bodies, refining us as a people, improving the world, correlating our lives to the infinite God unfolding on the finite earth." Judaism is about us, he's saying, not about them. So I want to take you one more place, and that's to Venus. Okay. Phil Klass was a professor of English, but also a science fiction writer. As a science fiction writer, he wrote under the pseudonym William Tenn, takeoff of William Penn. He was at Penn State. He was a Pennsylvanian. And in a collection of science fiction works, he wrote a book, a short story called "On Venus Have We Got a Rabbi?" And this piece, I think, sums up very well the Jewish view on extraterrestrial life. And I worked really hard on the paragraph in this book, so I'm just going to read my own words to you on this, summing up his story of "On Venus Have We Got a Rabbi?" As told by Klass, the Venusian Jewish community has the privilege of hosting the first interstellar Neo-Zionist conference. The Venusian family of Milchik, the TV repairman, has the honor of hosting 3 conference delegates from the 4th planet of the star Rigel. A problem emerges when these delegates from Rigel 4, the Bulbas, turn out not to look much like Milchik or any other Jews at the conference. Instead, they look like brown, wrinkled pillows with gray spots and short tentacles. The conference starts badly. In fact, the conference cannot start because the Committee on Accreditation refuses to seat the Bulbas. Even though the Bulbas have appropriate credentials, the Committee on Accreditation concludes that they cannot be Jewish because they do not look Jewish. In particular, they are not human. The conference is in chaos, unable to seat the Bulbas, but also unable to open because of the credentialing dispute. Rabbi Smallman from Venus is appointed to the high rabbinical court that will decide what should be done. The rabbis think deeply. What would happen, they ask, if humans go deep into space, perhaps to another galaxy even, and we find all kinds of strange creatures who want to become Jews? Suppose we find a thinking entity whose body is nothing but waves of energy. Do we say, no, you're not entirely acceptable? Finally, thanks to the wise counsel of Rabbi Smallman, the high rabbinical court makes a decision. There are Jews, and there are Jews. The Bulbas belong in the second group. Okay? Okay. So the conclusion from Judaism would seem to be there are no limits on God's power. The universe belongs to God, and God can do anything God wants to do with the universe. And maybe there's somebody out there, and maybe there's not, and that's up to God. And go back and study the Torah. That's what your job is to do. Don't worry about it. That's Judaism's approach to things. Islam, a different religion. Islam emerged about 1,400 years ago when the archangel of Revelation, Gabriel, revealed the word of God to the prophet Muhammad. Okay? This is supposed to be the archangel Gabriel, not the prophet Muhammad. Okay? In 622, Muhammad and his followers raced across the Arabian Peninsula from Mecca to Medina, establishing the first Islamic community. The words of the scripture known as the Quran are believed by members of the Islamic religion to be revealed to Muhammad and written down by his followers. So they are the holy words, the scriptural words for members of the Islamic faith. George Washington University scholar of Islamic philosophy, Ibrahim Khalil, wrote these words: the most common attitude towards science in the Islamic world is to see it as an objective study of the world of nature, namely as a way of deciphering the signs of God in the cosmic book of the universe. Natural sciences discover the divine codes built into the cosmos by its creator, and in so doing, help the believer marvel at the wonders of God's creation. From the very beginning, Islam was a religion in which the followers were supposed to study nature and discover and understand nature because God wrote the book of nature. That's how Islam began. And in the first several hundred years of Islam, Islam was a very scientifically advanced religion. For those of you who want to reach way back and remember having to study algebra, you might realize that the prefix al is an Arabic prefix, and algebra was invented by Islamic scholars, by Al-Khwarizmi, many hundreds of years ago. It's his fault you had to study algebra. Okay. Okay. Stanford University professor of Middle Eastern history, Ahmad Dalal, wrote these words: almost all sources agree that the Quran condones, even encourages, the acquisition of scientific knowledge and urges people to reflect on the natural phenomena as signs of God's creation. So one would expect that astronomers studying other planets, possibly discovering other worlds with other life forms, would be something that would be encouraged by Islam. Saeed Hossein Nassar is a professor of Islamic studies at George Washington University. He is one of the most influential Islamic historians and philosophers in the world today. He's the first Muslim to have been invited to and to have given the Gifford Lectures in Natural Theology in Scotland, which is a very prominent opportunity for a scholar. He has written, all beings in the universe are Muslim, i.e. surrendered to the divine will, which would suggest that whomever these extraterrestrials might be, if there are extraterrestrials, they're Muslim. That according to this understanding, every intelligent being in the universe is Muslim. Now that would be very different from what we just saw as an understanding in Judaism, in which Judaism would be for us on earth, and God can do what God wants with the rest of the universe. We're not worried about that. This would say everybody in the universe is a Muslim. So what do we do with that? Well, in order to understand the Islamic faith, let's try to understand it a little bit. There are what are known as pillars of the Islamic faith. And the pillars of the Islamic faith, in order to practice Islam, you are asked, you are expected, you are required 5 times a day to turn toward Mecca in order to pray. No matter where you are, 5 times a day at prescribed times of day, you're supposed to turn toward Mecca to pray. Also, sometime during your lifetime, you're supposed to undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca. The earth is a challenging place in order to figure out how to turn toward Mecca to pray. So this is a flattened earth. Mecca's over here. And these are lines that would help you figure out where Mecca is. When Islamic sailors began plying the seas and the oceans 1,300 years ago, they discovered that figuring out where Mecca was a tough thing to do. When you're on the middle of the Indian Ocean, thousands of miles from Mecca, on the surface of a spherical earth, without any land in sight, figuring out where Mecca is a tough problem. They figured it out. They figured out how to navigate by the stars. They understood the earth was a spherical object, and they were on the surface of a spherical planet. And they figured out not only celestial navigation, but they figured out 3-dimensional geometry. And that's why they had to invent algebra. And they figured out how to figure out where Mecca was, no matter where they were on the surface of a spherical planet. But if you happen to live over here, you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there are a lot of different directions to Mecca. And we could argue all day about which is the right direction to Mecca on the surface of a spherical planet. Is it the apparent shortest path? Which is the straight line? Do you look actually over the South Pole to get to Mecca? There are a lot of different directions to Mecca. And there are websites with equations you can find to help you decide, no matter where you are, if you're in Alaska, which direction is Mecca. And Islamic scholars will argue about which is the right direction to Mecca. Well, now, if I put you on a planet that is 100 million light years from the Earth, and if that planet spins in 4.5 hours and orbits a star in 10 hours, so it's spinning and it's orbiting, and you're 100 million light years from the Earth and 5 times a day, and your day is 4.5 hours, you've got to find Mecca, and Mecca's on the Earth. That's a tough problem. And we're laughing, and I don't mean it to be silly, but it's an interesting problem if you're a practicing member of the Islamic faith, because the pillars of the faith say that's what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca in your lifetime. And unless you can figure out how to violate the laws of physics, that's going to be a tough job to do. Now, if you've seen the movie Interstellar and you can figure out how to deal with wormholes, maybe you can figure out how to get here, but I don't know how to do that. So the pillars of the Islamic faith would seem to be in conflict with the scholarly comment that all intelligent beings in the universe are Muslims. So what do I do with that? What do we do with that? It's an interesting problem. So we have this question or this problem. Muslims on the earth are practicing the Islamic faith. Is it possible that Muslims on another world are practicing a different faith? Can we tease apart the word Muslim and Islamic faith? Are they necessarily the same thing? That's the question I'm asking. Can you be a member of the Islamic faith on earth as a Muslim? Can you be a member of a different faith on a different world and still be a Muslim? Maybe. Let's look at the scripture, the holy words of the Islamic faith in the Quran. So here we go. And first ask the question, is Allah the God of the whole universe? So these are verses from the Quran. Verse 13 and 16 says, Allah is the creator of all things. He is the one, excuse me, the supreme and irresistible. Verse 39-62, Allah is the creator of all things, and He is the guardian over all things. And verse 255, known as the throne verse, perhaps the most famous verse in the Quran, His are all things in the heavens and on the earth. His throne doth extend over the heavens and the earth. And verse 36-83, so glory to Him in whose hands is the dominion of all things. I don't think there's any question. If you read these verses, Allah, the God of Islam, is God of the whole universe, if you are a member of this faith. Do you believe, based on Quranic scripture, that other worlds exist? Well, verse 1-2, praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the worlds, plural. There's a hint. Verse 41:09, He is the Lord of all the worlds. There's a hint. Verse 65:12, Allah is He who created 7 firmaments, and of the earth a similar number. It would seem that other worlds exist. Are they populated? Are they populated with beings who worship Allah? The Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, who lived shortly after the birth of Islam in the late 7th, early 8th century, and was one of the revered early leaders of Islam, wrote, maybe you see that God created only this single world, and that God did not create Homo sapiens besides you. Well, I swear by God that God created thousands and thousands of worlds and thousands of humankind. Those are His words. But He's saying that because of what He believes He reads in the Quran. Verse 13-15, whatever beings there are in the heavens and the earth do prostrate themselves to Allah. There are beings in the heavens, not just here. Are these other worlds populated? Verse 19:93-95, not one of the beings in the heavens and the earth but must come to Allah most gracious as a servant. He does take an account of them all, and hath numbered them all exactly, and every one of them will come to Him singly on the day of judgment. Verse 21:19, to Him belong all creatures in the heavens and on earth. And this word creatures that I have in parentheses, and of course the Quran's not written in English, so this is a translation. But the word that's translated as creatures is da'aba. And that word, all the translators say that word means creatures with bodies, not angels. These are beings that have physical bodies. They are not angels. And among His signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the living creatures that He has scattered through them. And He has power to gather them together when He wills. These other worlds are populated by creatures who worship the same God. Yusuf Ali, who's an Islamic scholar and translator, has written, "It is reasonable to suppose that life in some form or another is scattered through some of the millions of heavenly bodies scattered through space." My conclusion from all of this is that Islam believes, the Islamic faith is one that believes the universe is densely populated with other beings. And those other beings worship the same God. But that Islam is a terrestrial religion practiced by Muslims on earth. That Muhammad was a prophet who brought Islam to earth, and those other worlds will have their own prophetically revealed religions appropriate for those worlds. That Islam is not for those other worlds, because you can't live on one of those other worlds and figure out where Mecca is and pray 5 times a day toward Mecca and undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca. Islam won't work for those other worlds. Now, if you're a Muslim on earth practicing the Islamic faith, there are more complicated questions for you if you get on a rocket and go somewhere else. Because you're a member of the Islamic faith, you have to figure out how to practice your Islamic faith somewhere else in the universe. But it makes no sense to take your faith somewhere else. Those other worlds will have their own religions. But according to the Islamic faith, they will worship the same God, which actually is probably consistent with Judaism. All right, go somewhere different. Hinduism. We got a lotus flower for you. Hinduism. To understand Hinduism, and for most of us, Hinduism is a little further away from what we know something about. So let me introduce you to a few ideas that are important in Hinduism and important in Buddhism and important in a number of other religions. One is samsara, which I may or may not be saying correctly. Samsara is the endless cycle of birth and rebirth, reincarnation, if you will. There are different levels of life that you believe in if you're a Hindu. When you die, you are then reborn as some other kind of being. And you may be reborn as a higher level of being or a lower level of being. You may be reborn as a god. You may be reborn as a fish. You may be reborn in another part of the universe, as we will talk about. But samsara is this endless cycle of birth and rebirth. Karma is the sum total of all the actions that you undertake during your lifetime and all the consequences of those actions. Together, they create the total ethical quality of your life. And the karma that is the sum total of your life determines what happens to you. It's not personal. There's no God who judges at the end of your life what to do based on the sum total of your karma. It just exists. And it's sort of a cosmic force that just determines what happens at the end of your life and determines how you will be reborn into the next life. So at the moment of death, that's a moment when reincarnation happens. And you have a soul known as a jiva, which is sort of the essence of your being, which will be transformed into the next living being. And it will take your karma with it. That jiva can hop around the universe. That jiva is not constrained by the laws of physics in the universe. Your karma determines the conditions of your rebirth. If your karma is good, that's good. You may have a nicer next lifetime. If your karma is not so good, well, good luck. So, in Hinduism, your life as an individual is thought of as an illusion. We are all part of this eternal whole known as Brahman, the Absolute. Brahman is beyond knowledge. We can't understand it. It's beyond words. It's beyond images. It transcends all our abilities to describe it. It's without qualities. For us, it's inconceivable. There are lots and lots of Hindu deities. All those deities are manifestations of Brahman, and they're all capable of mediating a spiritual path to Brahman. For you as a Hindu, what you're hoping to do is escape from samsara. The goal is to escape from samsara, to stop this endless cycle of birth and rebirth. And that is the problem, the existential problem that's at the heart of Hinduism, at the heart of Buddhism, at the heart of Jainism, escaping from this cycle of birth and rebirth. Escaping from samsara is difficult, but it's possible. If you practice Hinduism and you learn to escape from your egoistic self and achieve union with Brahman, you can escape samsara. Now, I can't tell you how to do that. Sorry. Okay. But there are thousands of years of lessons that might help you do that. Right. Swami Prabhupada, not sure if I'm saying that right, okay, who is the founder of what we know of as the Hare Krishnas, the Krishna Society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, was a prolific writer, a prolific translator, and he had a lot to say about extraterrestrial life. He wrote, according to Vedic understanding, the entire universe is regarded as an ocean of space. In that ocean, there are innumerable planets, and each planet is called a dvipa, or island. The various planets are divided into 14 lokas. So according to this tradition, there are 400,000 species of living beings in the universe with human-like forms, and many of them are advanced far beyond any of us. That's what he writes. He wrote a book called Easy Journey to Other Planets. And in that book he wrote, in the material world, the topmost planet is called Satyaloka, or Brahmaloka. Beings of the greatest talents live on this planet. The presiding deity of Brahmaloka is Brahma, the first created being of this material world. Brahma is a living being like so many of us, but he is the most talented personality in the material world. He is not so talented that he is in the category of God, but he is in the category of those living entities directly dominated by God. So Hinduism seems to believe in a richly populated universe with lots of planets, and we could be reincarnated anywhere in this universe. Okay. So reincarnation places no limits on where in the physical universe one could be reincarnated. Physics is not a problem. So you, when you die, might be reincarnated as some other kind of living being on this planet, but you could also be reincarnated anywhere in the universe as any kind of living being on any other planet anywhere in the universe. So this process of transmigration between living beings is uninhibited by the laws of physics as understood by Hindus. The ideas of karma and samsara apply throughout the universe, so any living being anywhere in the universe, in that sense, is a Hindu or would be affected by these. So any living being in the universe could be reincarnated on Earth. You could have had a previous life anywhere in the universe and shown up here. So those extraterrestrial beings could be just like us. They're struggling to increase their karma or improve their karma so that they can escape samsara as well. That would be Hinduism. So Hinduism would seem to suggest that, in effect, everybody's a Hindu or has the potential to be a Hindu no matter where you are in the universe, and Hindu is a universal concept. Truly universal. Which takes us to Buddhism. Buddha effectively grew out of the roots of Hinduism. So Buddhism is also a religion in which the goal is to escape from the suffering caused by samsara, to get out of this infinite loop of reincarnation. The Buddha, who lived in the 6th century BCE, was a real person who is understood to have discovered the knowledge that would liberate him from transmigration, to escape from samsara. So he's known as the awakened one. That's what the Buddha means, because he figured this out. What did he figure out? He figured out that there is something called the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, that life is about suffering. That suffering is caused by human desire. That the cessation of desire, which is achieving nirvana, ends your suffering. And that the enlightenment that's necessary for reaching a state of nirvana is found by following the Noble Eightfold Path. And he figured out what that Noble Eightfold Path was, and he taught it to his disciples. And if you are a Buddhist, you then try to follow that Noble Eightfold Path so that you too can escape from samsara. Buddhism actually has a very robust cosmology, structure for the entire universe. So here's your Buddhist cosmology. In Buddhist cosmology, you've got Mount Sumeru or Mount Meru, which is this mountain right here. Above the mountain, there's a ring of stars with the sun and the moon. Mount Sumeru has a root that plunges down. Below that are a number of hells. There are hot hells and cold hells. The mountain goes upwards and reaches into a number of heavens up here. There are a whole bunch of heavens up there. All of these worlds in Buddhist cosmology are known as the realm of desire. They are our universe. They are accessible to the human senses. But there are 3 realms as understood by Buddhists. The other 2 realms are known as the realm of form and the realm of formlessness. They're sort of parallel realms in some sense to this realm of desire. These other 2 realms are only accessible through meditation. So you could sort of think of there being 3 universes. One is this physical universe, which we can access through our senses. We can measure it. We can reach out and touch it. The other 2 you can only apprehend through meditation. So somehow this realm of desire we could match up in some sense with the universe that astronomers could observe. In a book known as the Numerical Discourses of the Buddha, Anguttara Nikaya, if I've said his name right, wrote these words: "As far as these suns and moons revolve, shedding their light in space, so far extends the 1,000-fold world universe. In it there are thousands of suns, thousands of moons, thousands of inhabited worlds of varying sorts, thousands of heavenly worlds of varying grades. This is the thousand-fold minor world system. Thousands of times the size of the thousand-fold minor world system is the twice 1,000 middling world system. Thousands of times the size of the middling world system is the thrice 1,000 great cosmos. The Buddhist universe is imagined to be larger than anything we can possibly imagine, and populated infinitely far with creatures. Nyana Panika Thera, who's a monk and co-founder of the Buddhist Publication Society, wrote these words: "The inhabitants of such worlds may well be, in different degrees, more powerful than human beings, happier and longer lived. They are inhabitants of this universe, fellow wanderers in this round of existence." And these two authors who wrote this in 1972 at the University of Ceylon, which is no longer the University of Ceylon. I think it's now the University of Sri Lanka, since country has changed. G.P. Malalaskara and K.N. Jaya Teleki. This was in a book written for the UN. "There are classes where the beings are different in body, but one in mind. Yet others are alike in body, but different in mind, while there are some who are alike both in body and in mind. A further set of 4 classes of beings are mentioned who are formless. All these are described as the several stations which the human consciousness can attain and find renewed existence after death. The human worlds are always represented as standing midway in the hierarchy of worlds." The human worlds. So there are lots of worlds out there. Some are populated by humans like us. Some are populated by other kinds of beings. Some are with forms. Some are formless. Lots and lots and lots of kinds of beings in this incredibly large universe. Conclusions we could draw from Buddhism would seem to be that the universe is vast and complex and filled with intelligent beings. But if you're a Buddhist, you wouldn't be much concerned with extraterrestrials because, and I've got a quote here, "The purpose of the Buddha's coming to this world was not to measure the circumference of the world and the distance between the earth and the moon, but rather to teach the Dharma, to liberate sentient beings, to relieve sentient beings of their sufferings." Which is just a little bit different from Hinduism, just a little bit different, in that this thing called Buddhism, following the Eightfold Path, would seem to be for us. That the whole universe might be full of beings that are reincarnated beings, but the path found by the Buddha would seem to be for us down here. And those beings out there, they may have their own Buddha who would provide their own path, which would almost be the Muslim type of approach. All right, Sikhism. Sikhism also comes out of the roots of Hinduism and Buddhism, in that Sikhism is also built on samsara and the hope of escaping this cycle of reincarnation. Sikhism emerged more recently in the 15th century in the Indian Punjab, which is this northern section of India. There are about 27 million Sikhs around the world. The first living guru, as he is known, Guru Nanak, lived about 550 years ago, and as understood by Sikhs, brought and delivered the Word of God to earth, beginning in about 1499. There were 10 living gurus. The last living guru left behind a holy text known as the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. And the Sri Guru Granth Sahib is thought to be the 11th Guru and is the supreme authority and head of the Sikh religion. And that's a holy text. That's the book that's left behind. There are a number of requirements for Sikhs that govern their behavior. We're most familiar with the turbans. Male Sikhs are required to wear turbans. If you're a devout Sikh, you're not supposed to cut any of the hair on your body, so you see the long beards, the long hair. Sikhs do believe in samsara, like the Hindus, like the Buddhists. When you break out of that cycle, your soul becomes one with God. That's as understood by Sikhs. If you're a Sikh, you believe you can reach this moment of spiritual unification by demonstrating your devotion and knowledge to God and by being charitable and performing acts of service to your community. All right, so now a lot of words for you from the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So this is the 11th Guru. These are presumed to be the words of God brought to earth by the Gurus. When he so willed, he created the world. Without any supporting power, he sustained the universe. He created the creation and watches over it. He formed the planets, solar systems, nether regions, and brought what was hidden to manifestation. He established the earth, the sky and the air, the water of the oceans, fire and flood. He created the moon, the stars and the sun, night and day and mountains. He blessed the trees with flowers and fruits. He created the gods, human beings, and the 7 seas. Many millions are the moons, suns, and stars. Many millions are the beings of so many descriptions. Many millions are the fields of creation and galaxies. Many millions are the etheric skies and the solar systems. Many millions are created in various forms. So many worlds beyond this world, so very many. The names and the colors of the assorted species of beings were all inscribed by the ever-flowing pen of God. You alone are the Lord of so many thousands of worlds. So these scriptural texts would seem pretty strongly to suggest that there are lots of worlds created by the one God who populated those worlds. And we're simply one of those worlds. However, in the midst of these, he established the home as a home for Dharma. Upon it, he placed the various species of beings. Their names are uncounted and endless. By their deeds and their actions they shall be judged. Which suggests Sikhism is just a terrestrial religion. The earth is the home for Dharma, okay, for Sikhism. Dharma is not for the rest of the universe. So the universe is populated according to these beliefs, according to these sacred writings. The universe is populated with worlds that were created by the one God worshipped by Sikhs. But the religion of Sikhism is not for the rest of the universe. The religion of Sikhism is for Sikhs on the earth. Dharma was for the earth. All right. One more religion for us today, and that's the Baha'i faith, for which I was least familiar. The Baha'i faith is a recent religion. It emerged in the 19th century, mid-19th century. A Persian nobleman, and I probably won't pronounce this very well, Baha'u'llah, proclaimed himself as a messenger of God in the early 19th century. Like Moses, like Jesus, like Muhammad, he said, I'm a messenger of God. He then proclaimed near the end of his life that his authority as an interpreter of the Word of God would be handed down to his son. And then his son handed down that authority to his son. the words of Baha'u'llah and then the words and interpretations of his son and grandson are understood as theological absolutes. There are about 5 or 6 million Baha'i faith followers worldwide. One of the things that Abdu Baha, who was the son of Baha'u'llah, said is that religion must be in accord with science and reason. The Baha'i faith is very dedicated to science and faith being connected. If it does not correspond with scientific principles and the processes of reason, it is superstition. For God has endowed us with faculties by which we may comprehend the realities of things. And he also wrote, to promote knowledge is thus an inescapable duty imposed on every one of the friends of God. He also wrote, as God is creator, eternal, and ancient, there were always creatures and subjects existing and provided for. If we conceive of a time when there were no creatures, we dethrone God and predicate a time when God was not. This is interesting because it seems to say that life has always existed in the universe. Always existed. And if you put science and faith together, our understanding of astronomy says the Earth has not always existed. We go back 4.5 billion years to the time when the sun and the Earth came into existence. Well, before then, there was no Earth. But according to this, there was no time before there were no creatures. Therefore, before the sun and the Earth existed, there were creatures in the universe. They must have just been somewhere else. And before life emerged on the Earth, even after the Earth came into existence, there had to be other places where life existed. Second quote here. There have been many holy manifestations of God. 1,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, 1 million years ago. All that we can say is that this terrestrial globe at one time did not exist. And at its beginning, man did not appear upon it. But from the beginning, what has no beginning, to the end which has no end, a perfect manifestation always exists. Therefore, it cannot be imagined that the worlds of existence, whether the stars or this earth, were once inhabited by the donkey, cow, mouse, and cat, and that they were without man. This supposition is false and meaningless. So, this strongly seems to suggest that there has always been a time, infinitely far back in time, when there were planets not just with unintelligent beings, because that presumably is what the donkey, cow, mouse, and cat are, but with human manifestations on them, intelligent beings capable of worshiping God. The earth has its inhabitants. The water and the air contain many living beings, and all the elements have their nature spirits. Then how is it possible to conceive that these stupendous stellar bodies are not inhabited? Verily they are peopled, but let it be known that the dwellers accord with the elements of their respective spheres. These living beings do not have states of consciousness like unto those who live on the surface of this globe. The power of adaptation and environment molds their bodies in states of consciousness, just as our bodies are suited to our planet. The writer was very conscious when he wrote this of racial issues on our planet, and that we are not all alike, and that the color of our skin is not what makes us human and makes us worthy before God. And therefore the shapes of our bodies are not what makes us worthy before God. And these creatures on other worlds could be very, very different. So when he says manifestations, he doesn't mean they have to look like us with 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 eyes. They just have somehow the spirit and intelligence that makes them like God. So, the Lord God of all is God of all the worlds, which are, in His words, countless without number. The other worlds will have intelligent beings made in His words, the image and likeness of God. But the standard for Him of image and likeness is intelligence and spirit. Human manifestations existed on other worlds in ages long before humans lived on the earth. Forever. The universe is densely populated both in time and in space. Infinitely far back in time and everywhere. So that's what we've got so far. We have taken a look at Judaism. Judaism would be happy with any life that astronomers discover anywhere in the world and would say, that's pretty cool, now go back and study the Torah. Okay. Islam would be comfortable with astronomers discovering extraterrestrial life. That would be just fine. And in fact, Islam would expect there to be life elsewhere in the universe. But what I think we've found is that the Islamic faith is a terrestrial religion, even though the God of Islam may be understood by members of the Islamic faith to be God of the whole universe. In the same way for Judaism, the God of Judaism would be understood to be the God of the whole universe, created the whole universe, but Judaism's for people on earth. Hinduism, the whole universe participates in samsara, in reincarnation. As a Hindu, you could be reborn, reincarnated anywhere in the universe. The universe is full of life. If you're a Hindu, you certainly would not be surprised if astronomers discovered life on other planets. You'd probably be pretty surprised if we didn't find life on other planets. But if we don't find life nearby, that's okay. There are plenty of other places to look for life beyond where we've currently looked, whenever that time frame is that astronomers have looked and not found something. We just haven't looked far enough. So Hindus will expect life to be out there. That discovering life would not be a problem. The whole universe would be full of Hindus. Buddhism, sort of the same thing as for Hindus. The universe should be full of living beings being incarnated and reincarnated because of how Buddhism believes life works in the universe. Sikhism, again, the same thing. Because of samsara and incarnation and reincarnation, the universe is full of life. But Sikhism, the specific path for escaping from samsara as understood by Sikhs, would be something that was brought by the gurus to earth. It's for us. It wouldn't be something that would be exported. For Buddhists, again, the Eightfold Path of Buddhism probably is something that was brought to earth by our Buddha. Other worlds would have their own Buddhas who would provide their own paths of enlightenment for those other worlds. Buddhism would not be something that we would export. Jainism would not be something we would export. Or, I'm sorry, Sikhism. And then the Baha'i faith, again, no surprises if we found life outside, beyond the earth. Members of the Baha'i faith would expect us to find life beyond the earth, would expect a universe that's densely populated with creatures. So none of the religions we touched on today would at all be surprised if astronomers find life on these other planets. They'd all probably be surprised if we didn't. But not finding life on the first few thousand, the first few million planets we study probably wouldn't surprise anybody. We just haven't looked hard enough. But not finding life out there probably would surprise everybody from all of these faiths. So that's where we are today. Next week, we're going to take up all of the Christian religions and the faiths that are derived from the Christian religions and that may or may not still be within the Christian umbrella, depending on who you talk to, whether you're in or outside of one of those faiths. But these are the religions that we're going to take on next week, and we're a little early today, but that's okay. You're all still awake, and that's pretty good. If you have questions, we can keep going. Any questions? Yes.
The man that wrote the last thing in the Baha'i faith.
Yes.
Was the Big Bang something that people talked about at that time, because they said there was never a time without creatures?
The question was, when we saw the last quote from the Baha'i faith, had the Big Bang been discovered yet? That's really the question. And the answer is no. All of those quotes from the Baha'i faith were 1913 or thereabouts or earlier. So this quote is from before the Big Bang had been discovered. So the understanding that the universe had a beginning in time, or modern understanding that the universe had a beginning in time, was not yet understood. Has this understanding been revised within the Baha'i faith, Baha'i community? I don't know. That's a good question. Yes?
You haven't told us, and I'm really disappointed how to achieve this Samsara state, but assuming we've managed to do that and escape the endless cycles of suffering, can we screw it up and be sent back?
First part was a disappointment that I have not provided you the recipe for escaping from samsara. But I've given you some choices. You could become a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Sikh. All of them have possible paths. So I offer you those choices. Okay? And they have thousands of years of advice. If you escape from samsara, can you be sent back? I think if you have escaped, you've escaped. Okay? Now, in some of the religious systems, you can achieve escape velocity, if you will, but postpone the escape to sort of be at an intermediate level in which you're not quite here, but you're not quite out there yet, so that you can still help others escape before you've escaped. Whether you can then be dragged back from that condition, I'm not sure. Yes? In the religions in which samsara is involved, you lose self-consciousness. Do you lose self-consciousness and awareness once you achieve samsara? According to those religions. I can't answer that question. I'm not a theologian. I'm not an expert on these religions. I know just enough to be dangerous. Okay? For a lot of these, I've learned enough to be able to answer the questions I've tried to ask, but I don't know the religions deeply enough to answer those questions more generally. I should just stop there, because I really don't know.
We recently had a couple of academics in Canada who wanted to call into question the Big Bang itself. Wanted to talk about a universe that has, I'm going to suggest, always existed. Comment?
The question was, there were a few academics in Canada who recently called into question the Big Bang and suggested the universe has always existed. There are always people outside of the mainstream, if you will, questioning the consensus. That's how science works. That's how science should work. So we should hope that there are always a few people being brave enough to say, I disagree with what everyone thinks is right. That doesn't mean they're right in questioning it. I don't know those particular people and their questions, but there are problems with standard, if you will, the standard Big Bang cosmology. that doesn't mean those problems are enough to say we're wrong about it. Right now, it's still the best explanation for all of the information we have. But we still don't understand why the universe decided to come into existence in the first place. We still don't understand why the universe, as we call it, inflated so fast in the first few microseconds and then stopped inflating so fast and started expanding at a fairly pedestrian pace. It's now accelerating again. But why did it go through what we call this inflationary epoch at the very beginning and stop doing that? We don't understand that. And the explanations that are given are fairly ad hoc, and there are a number of people who don't like that. And that's reasonable that they don't like that, so they question the theory, but there's no viable alternative right now. But there are questions, and there should be questions. When did the Big Bang Theory come into being? The discovery that the universe was expanding was first made in 1929 by Edwin Hubble. And by the mid-1930s, everyone agreed that the measurements that showed all the galaxies were flying apart was incontrovertible. Now we had to explain why the galaxies were all flying apart. And with all the galaxies flying apart, you can run the movie backwards, and if you run the movie backwards, they all come together, which suggests a beginning in time. And now you've got to explain that beginning in time. That's where the Big Bang comes from. The words the Big Bang were first coined, I think, in 1952 on a British radio show by Fred Hoyle, who was trying to get rid of the idea because he didn't like the idea. And he thought those words would make it sound so stupid it would go away. That didn't work, okay? So we still have the words. But that's where when the idea came into existence and when the words came into existence, the physics in explaining the Big Bang have been put together piece by piece by piece over the last 50, 60 years. And it's still being put together. And it's still being argued about. There are some pieces of it that everybody agrees with. And there are other pieces of it that we don't quite understand. But the big picture, if you will, of the Big Bang, that the universe is expanding, that the universe began as a very hot, dense, small thing early on, that part of it we all agree with. What exactly the details were like at the very, very beginning, that we argue about. And what came before the beginning, we can argue about. Then we're really into the theology. So I think we're probably out of time. I'm happy to answer more questions, but we'll do that off the books.